What would a life lived entirely inside your head feel like? Would it be a fantasy or would it be a nightmare? We've all had days when the world feels too loud, too chaotic, too overwhelming. But what if that feeling never went away? What if you retreated so far into your mind that you lost touch with everything outside it? This episode is driven by that question. Can you empathize with what I'm saying? Can you relate? Have you ever thought about how the world is a naturally frightening place? And it always has been, ever since we humans began enforcing our dominion over this poor planet. As many people around can't see it, you won't spend time asking such questions. What for? That would be a foolish waste of it. Ethics don't pay, don't fill one's stomach, don't increase one's social status. No, most people will tell you, you must play the game. Because that's what we are. Because that's human nature. Not me. You hear me? In such a reality, why even bother participating in this circus? Καλησπέρα. Good evening. Buenas tardes. Dobry wieczór. You're listening to After the Dragon, a reflective existential podcast about navigating life's changes. Episode 7. Reflections from the Underground. Coming back from bustling India, as I described in episode 6, I had reached the point of awareness and gratitude. It became a state for me that helped me to get back on track for what was to come. But at the end of that year, after that trip, I was still mentally and physically exhausted. I needed something different. I needed quiet, solitude, and peace. So I headed to my village, Domatia, nestled in the foothills of Mount Pangaio, a place of childhood summers and ancient myths, to detox, relax, unwind, and also see my grandma, whom I haven't seen for months at that time. I have to admit that we ain't much alike and that I don't speak much with her. But I guess it would have been a very nice bonus to go there and keep her company on a New Year's Eve she would have otherwise spent alone. I went there to rest my mind and racing thoughts, to take the necessary breath before diving in the sea of what was ahead. Yet 2024 had one last lesson to teach me. The one that I considered as the most didactic, as the one that connected the dots for me, coming from a book read in that voluntary solitude. A book I started and finished on the last day of the year. Fyodor Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground. Dostoevsky needs no introductions. He is one of the world's greatest writers, crafting masterpieces drawn from the depths of his struggles. As throughout his life, he faced it all: imprisonment, close death cults, addictions, heartbreaks, and health issues. He was caught and sentenced to execution for his revolutionary involvement as a young person, but was spared at the last moment, if you can call being sent to a Siberian prison camp as being spared. He endured seizures, came dangerously close to ruin due to gambling, and endured heartbreak after heartbreak. One of his lowest points was when he had to write a book in under a month, or risk losing all the rights to his works by his publisher due to their contract, including his newly published Crime and Punishment. Yet he still managed to pull through, writing The Gambler in under 4 weeks, almost without outside help. Almost, I say, because while he refused the help of other writers, he accepted the assistance of a stenographer named Anna, who soon became his wife. It is no wonder that such a personality managed to grapple some of humanity's darkest thoughts, playing with them in the shadows, exploring them in a perilous sword fight that would have its spectators at the edge of their seats. Notions like nihilism, for example, one of the first Westerners that entertained the idea on a deeper, actual level. And he did all this with some of the best writing ever conceived by a human mind. Dostoevsky's attention to detail draws you into his world. His writing waits on you. His tone darkens your mood, and his ideas haunt you long after you turned the last page. The Gambler remained my favorite book for years, with The Idiot being a close second. But Philosophizes' this recent episode on his work reignited my interest. After I came across episode 218, talking about the notes from the underground, I knew I had to read it for myself. And when I discussed it with my sister, and she told me she would left a copy of the book in Domatia, it felt like fate. Thanks to her too, and I guess like a shout out to my sister because I've never done that. Thank you, Fotini, for making this episode possible. I arrived to Domatia, I grabbed it and read it without distractions, taking it on walks in the mountains. It became my sole companion. I kept reading, even after I returned to my room, shivering away from December's cold, ignoring everything else around me. And it spoke to me in a way no other book ever had before. The protagonist of this book is, well, we never catch his name. Most call him as the underground man, and it's not a cool hipster kind of nickname. He is a 40-year-old retired public servant who's stuck in a loop of feeling superior to everyone around, yet unable to connect, weakened in his motivation to live, powerless in believing in something, anything that can help him crawl out of his misery. Feeling both superior and inferior, a Schrodinger's cat of existential despair, which, if you can tell, it's a simply disabling state. And he brings this dynamic all along the book, all across his depressing interactions. Not all people can empathize with such a character, so let me stop here to ask you this question. Can you? What kind of person are you? Are you someone who enjoys life for what it is? Or are you someone who spent years living inside your head, missing chances, doubting everything, and retreating from the world? Regardless, there is a beauty to behold when reading the underground man's sickening thoughts, as well as many of the other novels of Dostoevsky. But reading the notes from underground pages felt as this could have been me, a version of myself that completely gave up in life after that horrible 2024. I can't bring myself to believe that it was a coincidence that I started and finished this book on New Year's Eve in a room in Domatia, a village whose name in Greek literally means rooms, by the way. But as I closed the book's final pages and faced the protagonist's ultimate despair, it was almost time for the year to change. You see, I'm not going to spoil the ending, as I believe you really should read this book no matter what, and since it's a very short read too, really there are no excuses here. I'll just say this. It gave me the push for a long-awaited end to my suffering, a chance to leave my isolation behind, to reach out to others and understand that they may be going through similar stages in their life. This podcast began with a very self-centered premise, and it's true, as we can only change ourselves, as we are required to put on our masks before we tend to other passengers. But there is a time that we have to escape the cruelty of our heads and slowly reintegrate with the people around us. Take all the time you need, there is no rush, but when you're ready, remember, no life is worth living entirely inside your head. It's time to leave the underground and live life in its own messy, imperfect terms. Even if you don't know what you're doing, even if you still struggle with finding some meaning, move forward anyway. Simply put, life's the color you choose for it. So choose the shade that fits you. And if you don't know what it is, just get out there and explore. And maybe one day you'll find it. The only thing that matters is that the other option, not even trying, should not be an option. Because as Dostoevsky shows us, there's no life worth living underground, without love, without connection, within the vacuum of our heads. I took that first step that day. I left the underground, or, in my case, I left my room and went downstairs. I rejoined life, even if it was just by sharing a glass of wine and a laugh with my grandma. A small moment it may look like, or a small step it may seem, yet it felt like the beginning of something bigger. Thank you for reaching the end of the 7th episode. I cannot recommend a book more than Notes from Underground, as well as the philosophizes these episodes on Dostoevsky and the Kyoto School. The next episode will be on Thursday, the 10th of April. Until then, try to escape your own underground and take care.